Right, okay. Anyway, we definitely dedicated this year for First Lane, for Binyom Zevin Afianeta, and for Rochel Banama Shirley, and for Leah of the Neshama of Rabbi Yosef ben Yisrael Alter. Fine, okay. So when Moshe says to Hashem, Lama Hari Oisela Amazeh, then that is the classic question. And if you've ever been in a situation like yourself or somebody you love, then that's the question that challenges every single one of us. Why? And even more, why me? I don't know if I ever mentioned to you, but my late wife, when she was just first diagnosed with cancer, one night I woke up and she was hearing her crying in her bed, and I said, "What's wrong?" And that was the question. Why me? That's the question we're all struck with. We all, when we're in trouble, we want to know why. In that particular case, I had nothing really clever to say, but I said, "Well, phone Ramatasiyahu," who in those days was in Lakewood, and we couldn't get through with the 5 hours time difference. Oh, well, we did go through actually, but not to speak to him. But his wife said, his Rebbetzin said, you can phone in such and such a time, whatever it was. And just knowing that we were going to speak to him, that made all the difference in the world. Because we want to know why. Did I ever tell you this story? It's worth hearing this. He said, I always say that this disease, so she'd just been diagnosed with breast cancer. He says, I always say that this disease is a hemshach, a continuation of the Gezar Din from the Second World War. And he said, just like in the Second World War, you would not say to somebody who was in a concentration camp alongside you, you're here because you did this. Rather, it's a Gezar Din on the whole of Klal Yisrael, and as you belong to Klal Yisrael, as it were, you've been swept up in it. You wouldn't say you individually did anything wrong. And similarly, you don't say the same when somebody's got this disease. Intriguingly, the same number of Jews, the same proportion of Jews who died in the Churban in Europe is the same proportion of Jews who get cancer, which is the same proportion of Jews, of human beings, lahavdil, who get cancer, which is 1/3. So 1/3 of Jews died, the world population, if I remember rightly, so it's 1/3. So therefore, that is the ultimate question. And Moshe does speak very starkly to Hashem, and consequently, we'll come back to that in just a few seconds. I think there's a couple of things we have to establish beforehand. You see, when he's asking why, when we ask why, the natural response, it shows the human need to know why Hashem's doing things with you. When Yaakov Avinu famously says, after he has the Nevi'us and the ladder going up to heaven, and he says, if Hashem will be with me, and he'll give me lechem lechol beged lilbosh, then Hashem will be for Elokim, and it sounds, if you read it in the English, almost, well, again, it sounds like a chutzpah, and not only it sounds like a chutzpah, it sounds like he's making conditions, right? If you do this for me. But that's not what Yaakov's saying. He's saying, if I get the basic requirements that I need to fulfill what you want, then I know that I'm on the right track. That's all I'm asking for. I need a sign. Everybody needs a sign now and again that they're on the right track. Intriguingly, I think I once told you the story about my car crash in Manchester, outside Manchester. Did I ever tell you that story? I was driving home with my daughter from a place called Blackpool. That's an hour north of Manchester. And we'd gone to see my late mum, and I was with my daughter. She was 12, I think, at the time. It was a rainy night. Well, this was Manchester, so it could be any night. It was a rainy night. We were about an hour outside Manchester. We're just about 10 minutes from Manchester. A road called the M61. There was something called aquaplaning. Have you ever heard of that? Come across that? That's when there's water on the road, but the wheels on one side are making contact with the water, but the other side is making contact with the concrete, right? So there's friction there. So, and I had never heard of this. I was driving this side of the road, of course, in a car, right? Daughter there. My phone was off, the radio was off. I was just driving along, nearly home. And suddenly, it was literally as though a giant hand took the car and did this. And then went, pew, and we spun round and round and round. Crashed into the crash barrier in the middle. I think I was doing 70 miles an hour, I guess. Destroyed 120 yards of crash barrier. I know this because your insurance company has to pay for this, which I didn't know. All destroyed. And the car came to a halt. Now, there's 3 lanes in this road. There is where the big trucks go, it's called the slow lane. Then there's the middle lane, and then there's the fast lane, which is supposed to be for overtaking. We were in the fast lane. And we came to a halt. So if this is the road and this is the crash barrier, like this, completely blocking this road. The cars, from the bashing and the crashing, the car's horn jammed on. I opened my door. My daughter had been, Baruch HaShem, asleep, so she didn't get a fright or really know what happened. I got her out my side. I switched on my mobile phone, my cell phone. I phoned the police, which of course is 999 in England. But because the horn was on, the guy couldn't hear me. He said, I can't hear you, move away from the car. So I moved away from the car. He still can't hear you. I think he moved me away 3 times, maybe 4. Eventually I told him what happened, where we were. He said, stay there, we'll get a car with you as soon as we can. But instead of the police arriving, along came another car, 80 miles an hour in the fast lane. And I saw it coming. I grabbed my daughter's hand. This all happened in a second. The car smashed into my car. There was an explosion. Something, a piece of shrapnel, flew through the air and hit me in the eye, in the right eye. Baruch Hashem, in those days I used to wear, the aviator style glasses, like the pilots wear. It's the exact same shape as your eye socket. So it's plastic lens, plastic frame. I lost that. That was torn off my face, but it protected my eye. But I saw this in a second. I grabbed my daughter. We started running along the motorway with my car spinning, coming to get us. Then it came to a halt further on, only this way. And so the road split and there was a bridge. So we climbed into that bit. Along came the police eventually, and they took us home. My wife actually phoned me. I idiotically picked up the phone. Where are you? Vroom, vroom, noises. And she said, what's that? What's that? Anyway, so I told her, there'd been a little accident. The car was Yiskadash. Anyway, so when we got home, of course, my whole family were there. I looked like, there's an animal called a raccoon, which got round, sort of like black eyes. So I looked like a raccoon. Anyway, that was that. I was fine. Upstairs, my daughter slept in her mummy's bed. In the middle of the night, I woke up and I couldn't sleep. So I went downstairs and I started to write an email to my very good friend, Rabbi Professor Dr. David Gottlieb. And I was telling him this story, and suddenly it hit me how it was a Nes Goli. It was a complete miracle, so much so that I always, when I pass this road, when I go home to Manchester, on the way up to the Lake District, as I'll hopefully be doing in a few weeks' time, I always make the bracha, Sha'as Li'nes Ben Makam Hazeh. Why? Why was that a miracle?
The second one further away.
Oh, why?
Apart from the fact that you survived the car accident, no problem. But then, because of the horn, which got stuck.
The horn. That was the miracle. The horn jammed on. Now, I don't know statistically what is the possibility of such a thing happening. But because the horn jammed on, then that meant that I was told to move away. Because otherwise I'd been standing there. It would have, somebody else would be giving the shiur tonight. So that was the story.
First thing, you have to pass other side of the road. You have to pass.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah,
Then you're protected.
yeah, little bit. Yeah. Anyway, so that was that. I wasn't seriously hurt, but I was a bit shaken up. 2 weeks later, the reason that I give an Alshich here is because I was Zoikas when I moved as a young man, a teenager from Glasgow in Scotland to Manchester in England. Then I was lucky enough to be taken under the wing of somebody called Rabbi Yoina Balkand. Now, of course, Shimi will know exactly who that is. This gentleman had been, that's him. He had been a Rebbe. He had his own cheder in Manchester for over 60 years. He was the Rebbe. Cheder and Doris of children and young men had been taught by him. And unfortunately, at the end of his life, he got dementia. I'd gone to see him in the old place that he was, the care home, and it was heartbreaking to see somebody who was very sharp and very clever, and it was horrible to see. Anyway, basically, He'd also become very ill. They'd moved him into a hospital. And the hospital that he was in, he got gangrene of the leg. Gangrene, really bad. So, I don't know why, but I had an overwhelming, I was still pretty schwach, but I had an overwhelming desire to go and see him. In fact, one of my Talmidas was phoned up by one of his Talmidim, who was now a lord in the House of Lords in England. An old man who was in Manchester and wanted to go and see him. And she was a nurse, so she took him to see him. And it's funny because when she was speaking to him, she said, and he was in a coma, he was unconscious. But of course, even if you're in a coma and unconscious, doesn't mean to say you don't know what's going on. And she said, Rabbi Balkan, you don't know me, but I'm a Talmud of your Talmud, Yehuda Yaina. And I've learnt lots of Alshich since I came to Manchester. And she said that his eyeballs were moving underneath the eyelids. That's called rapid eye movement, REM. And that shows you that there's listening. Anyway, she told me that, and I thought, you know what? And one of my Talmidim came to see me. And I thought, I've not been to see my old Rebbe since this accident, 2 weeks. I got dressed, went into the car, was driving down the road, a road called Singleton Road, and I just was really feeling schwach. And I thought, Juliana, this is stupid, you're not well. And then another little voice in my head, go. I came to the hospital, horrible old hospital, Victorian hospital. Found the door that said visitors entrance, locked. Found another way in, and I'm not, this story is exact. I got into the hospital, asked for how to get to the ward, and I got lost 7 times, or maybe the directions are wrong. Eventually I came to the ward, there was a nurse sitting there, and I went in and said, I'm looking for Rabbi Balkan. Oh, she said, just go down and turn left and you'll see him. So I went down, turned left, and there he was, looking at his ward. There was 2 nurses and a doctor around about his bed, and they looked and saw me and they smiled, and then they looked back at him, and then they looked at me and went, and then they drew the curtains. So I came in and I'm just standing there, didn't know what was going on. The curtains opened, a nurse came out, she said, are you family? So we know Chazal say, if somebody teaches you Torah, it's as though they're your father. And I said, yes. Now his son Aryeh had been sitting at his bedside for a month, hadn't moved, but he had to go and pay a bill, an electricity bill. And he wasn't there, there was nobody with him. And they said, well, we think he's dying. You better come in. So they came out and I went in and they walked away. So I took my old Rebbe, who made me what I am, set me in the road of the Alshich so much. So I took his hand and I said, Rebbe Yoina, it's Yehuda Yoina. We have to say Shema. And his eyes were dancing like crazy. So I had the source of saying Shema with my old Rebbe.
He didn't die.
Then he took one big long breath like this. And I thought that was him. But then he did it again. Then he did it a 3rd time. There was a little vein underneath his eye which was going, and that was that. And just then, punktlich, Aryeh appeared. His son appeared. It was literally, I just went out and there was Aryeh coming. And I had to tell him. And the family were so pleased that I had been with him. Sometimes, if you put all that together, you know, I wasn't at work running about like a crazy person, which I normally am doing, was able to think about this, was able to go down and be with, I'm sure that voice inside my head when I said, I'm not well enough, and said, no, come. I'm sure it's him calling me. Maybe it's just a mishigas, but I felt I was being, when I think about that story, which I try and think about very often, then I'm sure it's a sign from HaShem that, you know, you're on the right path. Sure. There's a Rabbi Dessler, before we come to the Alshich. And the Rabbi Dessler talks about something called Isrusa de la Tossa and Isrusa de la Il. And so what is that? So basically, he says sometimes Isrusa de la Tossa is the madrega that you reach. Isrusa means the same as Hisaurus. It's an awakening, a madrega that you reach through your own efforts. Isrusa de la Tossa. And then there's Isrusa de la Il. And then there's sometimes HaShem will give you such an open miracle. I mean, I felt the story I just told you was an open miracle. But maybe the horn, maybe that was. But for me, that was an open miracle. But sometimes for Klal Yisrael or for a person, it's such an open miracle, there's no shadows about it at all. The obvious example of that is Kriyas Yamsuf. When Klal Yisrael comes to Kriyas Yamsuf, are they roy for Kriyas Yamsuf? Certainly not. The Malach of Mitzrayim says, Halol Avodah Zarah, Halol Avodah Zarah. They're certainly not roy for it. But sometime Hashem gives you an experience which catapults you to incredible heights without you having done any work for it. That's why Chazal say, what a Shifka saw at Kriyas Yamsuf was greater, a greater clarity of Nevi'as than that of Yechezkel ben Buzi Akon. But like the Novi Yechezkel. So I can't remember who says this, but somebody says something very brilliant. So why is she called a Shifka? If she's a Nevi'ah, a higher Madrega of Yechezkel ben Buzi Akon, why are you calling her a Shifka, a maidservant? And the answer is because Yechezkel ben Buzi Akon worked to become Yechezkel ben Buzi Akon. And consequently, he was a Novi. But she got it as a freebie. She got it as a free gift. So therefore she stays exactly who she is, a Shifka. And astonishingly, 3 days later, when they go through the Yamsuf, 3 days into the desert, what happens? No water. The reaction? Rebellion! Terrible! Why did you bring us here? We like it in Egypt. It's a tourist attraction. You can go scuba diving. They've got dolphins. Let's go back. And so what happened to the Madrig of Yechezkel ben Buzi Akon? Because it wasn't really them, when they're faced with a challenge, well, what would Yechezkel ben Buzi Akon do if he was in the desert without any water? What would you do? I'd daven. Why didn't they daven? Because that wasn't the real Madriga. And that's the shtick of this, says Rabbi Dessa. If you get it as a free gift, something that you've not earned, then automatically it will be taken away from you afterwards to see whether you took that experience, that Hava Amina. It's a Hava Amina of who you could be. Did you take it and make it you? But you're always going to be tested afterwards to see if that's the real you. Sorry? Nashem ben Amminadab. Yeah. Maybe. But the question then would be, why did they rebel 3 days later? And the other question still remains, yeah.
But then they were on a higher level, for sure.
Well, they only written them, and they've still got work to do, because they've got 7 weeks to get to the Madrega, really, of Har Sinai. Here, they're still pretty shach, Madrega-wise. The interesting thing is, astonishing, this Rabbi Des, that's in Chelik Beis, and you find it on page 33, 34, he brings a Maisa here of, I'll read this to you. Vapi Hagdoma Zu, and that's basically that short Hagdoma I've given you is just a little bit of this. Begam Hanhogasa Yidu Al Shalagro. It gives us an insight into the minhag of the Vilna Gaon. Hine, closest to Agro, Reb Chaim Mevolozhin, the Hagon, Reb Chaim Mevolozhin. Reb Chaim Mevolozhin says, "Bagdoma to the Perish Agro, B'Safra Tzitnusa," and his Agdoma to the Gro's Sefer, B'Safra Tzitnusa. Shagro Lorotz lekabel shum magidim, shenishlach mina shemaim legalas lesoidus atara. The Vilna Gaon refused. I don't know how he refused, I don't know how he got the message, but somehow or other he knew that they wanted to send him, like Rabbi Yosef Kara was sent a Magid, a Malach. They wanted to send him a Malach as well to teach him secrets in the Torah. And he refused it. And he writes that the Vilna Gaon, so his Talmud, Chaim Volozhin said, the Vilna Gaon in his Anivas did not want to have any Madrega in the Torah unless he'd worked for it and it was his. And not only that, listen to this, V'hoya yiro, and he was scared, Mihanasionis sheyova akakach bivadai. He was terrified of the tests that would come. If you get it for free, you're going to be tested afterwards. And he was scared. The Vilna Gaon was scared that it would fail the test. Astonishing stuff. Now, nearly there, one more thing to say. So Rabbi Dessa, in the same Chedek of Miktam Eliyahu, he's talking about Yosef HaTzadik. And Yosef HaTzadik, he says the following thing. He says, Ki inyan malchusai b'Mitzrayim hoya matona me'Hashem Yisborach. Right? Obviously Hashem gave him to be the king of Mitzrayim. Isrusa de le'el. However, And that was an opportunity, as we talked about in our shirim in the last 2 weeks, for him to change Egyptian society and to destroy their koichos of Tumah to the extent that it wouldn't wipe out Klal Yisrael. Aval, Harei Hoyazeh b'shas hest upon him, shas hagolis, b'shas hest upon him, ein noistim matonis esrusa de la'il. It's a geder, it's a bit like given a free gift, but at this time, in his case, it wasn't. In fact, what happened to him? So he says, first of all, he was sold as a slave by his brothers. I mean, that's got to be the ultimate. I don't have any brothers, but I've always taught my children family comes first, and you always stand by your family, etc., etc. So basically, if anybody is going to betray you, if it's your brothers, that must be very, very tough. And they sell him to be a slave. And they sell him to be a slave in Mitzrayim, the worst of all places, where no slave is ever going to get out. So it's a life sentence, almost a death sentence, spiritually for him. Or so it could be. And then he withstands all the tests, and there's a mice with Ishas Patifar, and he passes that test, and that was a big one for him. And when he passes that test, he's still accused, still found guilty. And so he says here, and all of the tests he got, V'lo harher achar midosav yisbora klal. But in no time, of all the tests he had, and he's thrown in prison, and then he thinks he's going to get out, and not once did he batayna against Hashem Yisborach. That's Esrusa de Latosa. Esrusa de Latosa can generate a reward mina shamayim. If you get it for free, then, and you haven't done anything, then you're going to be tested, and then you might fail. Something that Vilna Gaon was scared about. But Yosef Atzadik had terrible nisyonos, and still he passed them all. And then Hashem could give him something, but he'd earned it. When I went in for my 2 faheres with the Gates of Roth and Yeridea, it was just me and him, 2 6-hour faheres. Over 2 weeks. And I remember going out having passed this test and thinking, I'm a rabbi. They can't take it away from me. No, I might be a pretty poor rabbi. In fact, I certainly am. But still, I felt, I'd done that, and it's mine. And Rabbi Dessa says that. Unless you give it away, that madrega you've reached, it's yours. So far, so good. The challenge, therefore, of Amunah, going back to Lama Hari Osala Amazeh, the challenge of Amunah is when you're not shown. He wasn't shown. Yosef Atzadik was not shown. I feel that Hashem showed me that when I survived that car crash and the miraculous honking of the horn. I felt he showed me that when I was the person with my Rebbe. I felt that when I was in a plane crash in South Africa and I survived that. There are times when you can feel that you've been shown, but when you're in a matzav which is horrible and you've got no signs, when Hashem is not showing you, when you don't even have beged, lil bosh, from lechem lechol, then that's when really Amunah is a big, big challenge. It's not when you see it so much, it's when you don't see it, then Amunah is a big challenge. Okay. With that as our Hagdama, let's have a look in the Alshich. Now, we've got 2 Alshich sheets there. The first one is not on the Seder, an Seder, we'll come to that secondly. The first one is on Shema Yisrael, so as you can see, Devorim, B'Vov, and Daled. And so, let's look at this. It's tremendously, and the reason why I put this here is because we're going to be focusing a little bit on Yud Kei Vav Kei and Elokim. That's going to be critical. That's right. So that's going to be critical for what's going on. Okay, Shema Yisrael. So Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So he says Haroi, top of the page. So Haroi, this is quite, I think this is very, very, very enjoyable. Alshich Haroi Yomer. It should say Hashem Elokeinu Echad. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Echad. What's it? Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, and then again Hashem Echad. So he's going to give us 3 insights into this. It's just very short, really. So he's going to say, Yomer Shema Yisrael Kulchem Loshen Yochid. So Shema should be Shamu, no? That would make it in the plural, if he's talking to Yisrael. But it's Shema, which is in the singular. So he says, why? Shehu ba'aktus halavovas ke'echad. Why is it in the singular? Because the nature of Klal Yisrael should be that we're Ish Echad, Belev Echad, we stood at Har Sinai, like that, we're unified. Shema Yisrael, Kol Lechem Loshen Yochid Shehu Ba'achdus Halavavas Ke'echad, but Zeh Yechuev Lonim. And that state is obligatory for Jews to be on. Yanki Hashem Hu Elokeinu. Why? Because Hashem is our God. Ki gam b'Hashem bechinas din. And with regards to Hashem, this is interesting, there is a bechinas din, be'elokeinu haniskar hu Hashem, ki boy gam bechinas rachamim. So again, I don't think I read that properly. Ki gam b'Hashem, in the Yud Kei Vav Kei, bechinas din. There is din in Yud Kei Vav Kei. And we'll see that when we come to our Seder clearly. And in an Elokeinu, which we normally think of being Midas Adin, there's Rachamim. And Yiskar Hu Hashem, there's Hashem in that as well. Therefore, Ki Bo Gam Bekinas Rachamim. So Shema Yisrael, Hashem, Elokeinu, Hashem. So Hashem is Elokeinu. That is to say, there's sometimes Midas Adin in Hashem, and sometimes Elokeinu, there is, the next is Hashem. Okay. And both those things, those two aspects of Hashem are simultaneous. And therefore they're one. And we are obliged to copy the behavior of Hashem Yisborach. There's a whole sefer in this called Tomer Devorah, as we know. Just like He is merciful, you should be merciful, etc., etc. And that's why He will be called our God, because we are copying Him, and not the Umas Ha'olam, who don't copy Him. Al-Sharish Actus Nafshasenu, because it hints at the Actus of Klal Yisrael. That's why it says, when we're down to Mitzrayim, it says Shivim Nofesh in the singular, because the absolute state, the absolute mile of Klal Yisrael is when we've got Actus. Okay. Im Sheyotz Akol. And that's why we're supposed to be like Him. So that's one thing He has to say in Shema Yisrael. Second of all, Shema Belev Echad. What does that mean? Shema Belev Echad. V'kabel Yisrael bein Yisnag imcho b'shem Hashem shu rachmim. That means to say that we are Makabel Hashem on us, whether He is Hashem, bein b'shem Elokeinu, or whether He is Elokeinu, when you can't see Him, as we just said before. It's easy to make yourself an Ebed to Hashem when He's giving you all sorts of signs that you're on the right track. It's far harder to see Hashem. And I just heard just today, what's that, the guy who's the big anti-Frum guy in the Knesset? Tommy Lapid. Right, do you know anything about him? I knew nothing about the guy. I was reading the book, or listening to the book, because I listen to books of Natan Sharansky, his new book. And I didn't know as a young boy, he saw the Nazis take his father away and kill him. Lapid. And he saw his father being taken away by the Nazis, right? And it's you got to know somebody's story. Right? So it's hardly a surprise that people went through the Holocaust and came out and were not frum. Although, I have to tell you, that's not a riot for anything. Because in one of my books I wrote about this, but what I would say, when people used to say to me, what do you say to somebody who was from Jew and he went through the Holocaust? This was something in Antwerpen. I used to stay with a family in Antwerpen when I used to give share in there. And he told me, this fellow, lovely guy, he was in the jewelry, in the diamond business. And he said as a boy, he was walking along the road, and there was a guy coming towards him. He was going with his daddy to shul. And there was a guy coming, newspaper, and as he passed the guy, his father said, Rabbi Yankel, was Herzog. And he said, Baruch Hashem. So then the Yankel says to him, the Yankel says to him, where are you going? In Yiddish. He said, Yankel, Shabbos Kodesh, get the shil. He says, shil. Ich hab nicht die Welt or jene Welt. I have not this world or the world to come. And off he went. Now this fellow was from a very Choshev Hasidic family. And he married a woman from also a very Choshev Hasidic family. And then they saw what happened in the Holocaust. I mean, Jews were hung from the lampposts in the streets in Antwerpen. And they lost all their Yiddishkeit. They lost all their Yiddishkeit. One of their sons became a Baal Tshuva, and the mother never spoke to him again. So, what do you say to people like that? I've said, I've got nothing to say to people like that. Who am I to judge somebody who went through such Gehenna? I can't judge people like that. I don't want to judge people like that. But I would ask them a question. What would you say to somebody who wasn't from and went through the Holocaust and said there is a Hashem? More than that, what would you say? One of my great teachers, Rav Halpans, the Tzaddik Kodesh Livrocha, he told me that there was a goy who became a ger tzedek in Dachau. In Dachau. He had bris. What?
What is so? Why became?
That I don't know. But he decided to become a ger tzedek in Dachau. I think it was Dachau. And so underneath the huts, they dug secretly a mikveh. They got, the wooden things for the railway lines, we call them sleepers in English, I don't know what that is, the railway, these things. They used them to build the mikveh. They got rainwater to come into it. This guy had Mila and Priya and Tefillah in Gehenna. So what do you say to him? So it's not a raya. Sof kol sof, obviously, if people go through terrible things, it's very hard to condemn them, unless, of course, you've been through the same things and you can go in the opposite direction. Fine.
The basic story. There was a guy in Antwerp, so he was a Swedish Einikel, Sansa Einikel, and became completely not religious.
Oh, this was I'm told, was a Sansa Einikel as well.
Was in Haifa, somebody from Belz, who was by the basic school. Basic school asked him what he is doing, because it was a closer before the war.
Yeah.
He didn't have sense, he didn't want to say the guy is completely off and nothing. So the Rebbe say, these people are going straight to Gan Eden, but you're not allowed to tell them this.
That's so important. I had the Satmar Rov said the same.
I understand he got Gan Eden, but we have to show him that he's not on the good track.
Yeah. I had the Satmar Rebbe said the same thing, that such people are going, it was too big in a sign, but as my Satmar Chaver tell me it's not true. But that's the Ger Rebbe said that'll do for me. A basis shot. Oh, good, that'll do for me. Okay. So where are we up to? Yom Shema believe Echod, the Kabbalah Yisrael Ben Yisnag Imachol B'Shem Hashem. That is to say that we're being Makabel Hashem, whether he's Hashem, that's Rachamim towards us. Ben Shem Elokeinu, Shudin, Nikol B'Hashem. Ki Allah shtei habachinat heim Rachamim, both at the end of the day are Rachamim, Zeh Hashem Elokeinu Shem Echad, Ki heim Yisurim L'toiva B'lo L'Enakim. Don't think that when Hashem punishes you, this is a big mistake that non-from Jews think, that it's a punishment like, you punish your neighbor who parks in your space. It's not that. It's a tikkun. Nisyonos are tikkunim. But don't be so much astonished. That's another reason. One last little shtickle. Oy yomer b'shem lev meharoy hoy yomer Hashem elekecha. Why not say Hashem Elokecha? Shema Yisrael, it's in the singular, so keep it in the singular. Hashem Elokecha, Hashem Echad.
No, they want to say to Yaakov, our God and your God is the same. Can you say Hashem Elokecha?
Noch einmal?
Shema Yisrael,
Yeah.
listen, Father Yaakov,
Yeah.
Hashem Elokeinu is our God, and he's this.
Okay.
That we are the same. Can you say
Okay.
Elokecha?
So, he wants to say, in that case, the Shema should be Shamu. Okay. Main Shema. But this, I like this one very much. But it's talking to a Yochid, right? And it's telling us the following: Shema Yisrael, afilu shesira she'in shar ha'am shlimim likro shem elokus yizborach alehem. Even if you were to be in a generation where you are literally, as they say in Yiddish, Eina Alein, that everybody else is like the daughters of Avram Avinu, and you're the only Avram Avinu, still be an Avram Avinu. Baloshin Yochid, Likro Elokecho, Ki im Elokeinu, Ki im Zeh Tabit, Ki hu be'asma Hashem Echod, Kain ata yochid dobik boy, that you be the one who's attached to him. And don't go along with the rest of the. Even though if it were to be the rest of the Klal Yisrael, Rahman Islam had abandoned Hashem, then you should still not do so. Now we turn to the Alshich on our Parsha. And why is this falling out? This doesn't like me. Oh, here it is. Good. So go from where it says Va'al derech hapshat. Now, al derech hapshat is on the fourth line in the second paragraph in the middle of it. You can see it. Va'al derech. Good. Va'al derech hapshat. Yom, it says the Alshich. You got? So on the second paragraph, fourth line, middle, the abbreviation, the word gedoyle, and then behind that. Yep. Okay. So he says, "Val derech pshat yomer, kini poi golahu yizborach hashkochosai beprati pratim." Here Hashem is letting you know when Moshe turns around and says, he's showing you exactly the detail to which he deals with somebody mida keneged mida. How does that work? To pay a person back, mida keneged mida, listen to this, because we don't normally learn under this. Not kamasehu, but kamasehu ukalavovoi. What you did and what you thought when you were doing it. Even though Moshe spoke harshly to Hashem Yisborach, al Hashem. The reason he did it, says the Alshich, this is his shita, is because he has such pity on the children of Hashem Yisborach. His mind he was furious about this. And that's why these words popped out. Because Hashem is not a person. Who just sees with his eyes. Hashem sees into the heart of why somebody's done something wrong. Hashem, believe Moshe. It was that love that Moshe had for Klal Yisrael, Hashem's children, in his heart. And indeed, as the Pasuk says in the Yeshio, but Tzarosam lu loy tsar, just like Hashem has tsar when they are in pain, so does Moshe Rabbeinu. And we're supposed to follow Hashem, so what's he doing wrong? But Tivar kama ish dagose beliba al tsaras benoye bekori Yisborach. He's so distressed at what's happening to the children of Hashem Yisborach. Alkein haitzim epiv milin zeroim. He says something which is very strange. So therefore, Hashem's examining what your motivation was. Yeah, what you said, that wasn't appropriate. But why you said it was fully appropriate. Yeah, what you said came from the outside, inside to the outside. But your motivation and your heart was right. Because you were upset about what was happening to my children. So therefore, why does it say Daber Elokim? Daber is harsh, and Elokim is harsh. El Moshe v'yoma Elov ani Hashem, which is suddenly it flips around and now it's ani Hashem. Daber Elokim El Moshe, and then Hashem should kush b'dibur bilvad. What he did wrong was he spoke wrongly. Va'al toiv liboy, but because his heart was pure, v'yoma Elov ani Hashem. Then he says ani Hashem. Baal Rachamim, the Baal Rachamim, Rachmecho al Sharachman al Benai. So therefore, Mida Keneged Mida, I will have Rachamim on you because you had Rachamim on my children. Oh, you did something wrong? Yeah, I'll speak harshly to you as well.
What is the Mida Keneged? Also Choto, what is Moshe said? Bos Yoshe, I think.
What?
Also Bos El Paroi.
Yeah. Me'ad Bos El Paroi, L'daber Bishmecho. Things that got what? Yeah.
So you
no, just the. Yeah, just the Lama Hari Oisa.
The middle was Os Yosher. No?
Why saying the Os Yosher? Why in Ozzy Yashu? Where's the meter there?
He saw the good from the Einstein.
Oh, no, but here already he sees the... No, but taking him out, he's going to see the good in a second. Hashem says, look, the human reaction when something goes terribly wrong is why. And what does Hashem say? Ataroi. You know, we're giving this year in Israel. When am I getting in? This is the Israeli response to some... Right? But Hashem says that as well. We want to know now. My wife's got cancer. Why? Now. Hashem says, wait and see. Wait and see. Okay. Then, fine. Now, another one is three things, and they're really geschmack. Second one, there's another way of looking at this, which is quite similar to the previous one. V'yidaber Elokim el Moshe, our opening words. Shedaber loy kashas, that he spoke to him harshly. V'achachach omer loy, al ruchacha, don't be worried. Shebeshil zeh emayet geda nuvoasko. That, yeah, I'm telling you did something wrong, but don't think, having done something wrong, it's going to have such terrible consequences that you're no longer on the level of the Novi that you are, which no other Novi has ever been before and will never be after that. That is to say that you see me with clarity that nobody else sees. Because all other Nevi'im see Hashem not with complete clarity. Ki ani Hashem. Because then, after he says that, Vayoma Elov Ani Hashem, Hagodl, Dibar B'cho, the same name that I spoke to you at that Madrega before, I'm still speaking to you. Ani Hashem. It's still that Madrega. Glomer, Ani Kasher Ad Koi B'Shem Zeh, V'lo B'She'ena Ma'ira. I'm carrying on speaking to you the same Madrega that before. You've not dropped down. You've not gone down to whatever level it would be. And then the last one is very, very interesting. Or, sorry?
This is something new from the Alshich.
Yeah.
Don't think I
will. Or let's talk about it as we have been already, that this is a continuation from the previous thing, that Lam Hariyas Lam Hazeh. V'yom Hashem el Moshe atasire. What did Hashem say to him? Now you'll see. Well, this is interesting. Shenero Oisai posuk can explain it vacuum. It seems a bit out of place, this posuk. Don't worry about that. But anyway, Achiomer, hine amarti ki paro harala amazeh. You've said that Paro has done things which are bad for the Jewish people since you went because I told you to go, and it seems like a failure to you. But I think he shaifit kol haaretz hu yevorach shalom yishalom leparak arasi. Don't think so. Don't make that mistake. Don't think that the Shofet, Ha'emes, Hashem Yisborach, is not going to give him what for. And this is interesting. V'la Ashkonim, and to his faithful ones, Yishalom Tov. He's going to give them the right word. V'hine Yudano, it's known. Ki tzadikim mahafkim midas adin la midas arakamim. Now this fits what the Alshich said before. Remember he said in midas arakamim there's a bit of din, and midas adin is a bit of rachamim. Well, listen how he lends it here. Ki tzadikim mishafkim, and midas adin lamidas arachamim, as it says. Now yours says, the thing that I printed out from says this is Tehillim, Kof Gimel. Am I right? Well, it's not. It's Habakkuk. Habakkuk got Gimel Beis. I don't know where they get that mistake from. Anyway, it says Baroigev Rachim Tiskar. When I'm angry, I will still have Rachim on us. And Rishoim, Mahafkim Midas Arachim Midas Adin. But Rishoim, what they do is turn Midas Arachimim into Midas Adin. And that's what it says in Parshas, by, of course, the Meiser of the Dor HaMabel, V'yam Hashem Emcha Es HaOdam. And now let's read on. B'zeh Yomer Poa. That's what it's saying here. Hu Yisborach, Yomer Hashem, Shu Midas Arachimim. So Hashem says to Moshe, El Moshe Ata Sira. Now you'll see Asher Ese the Paroi. Who says what Paro's going to get? Hashem does. The Rachamim is going to. Sometimes Rachamim contains din. Ki Harashoyim Harachamim Yilahem Ladin. Hashem's Rachamim will turn into din. Achli Yisrael Asukim B'Yidaber Elokim Shu Midas Adin. And who speaks here? V'yidaber, our posuk, v'yidaber Elokim, here in Va'ira, v'yidaber Elokim El Moshe, That's Midas Adin. V'yomer love Ani Hashem. Kalema Ani ho Elokim haniska she'ani Midas Adin. Eya Hashem is hafik l'rachamim. I'm promising you that that's going to turn into rachamim. You want to know when? Right now. What you think is din, it's rachamim as well. The real challenge seems to be if you don't know you're on the right track. So Moshe says, well, are they on the right track here? But this one last thing, famously when Moshe says Lama Rosa Lama Zeh, Rashi brings in Gemara in Sanhedrin Kuf Aleph Omid Beis. It says it's the Rashi brings a medrash. I've tried finding the medrash. I think maybe we've lost this medrash, but Rashi certainly had it. That when he said Lama Rosa Lama Zeh, it's when the children were being thrown into the holes in the walls. Now, what's the point of that? It's not going to help the building anything. It was a punishment. It wasn't. We can do a brick, we'll throw it at a baby. It's going to help. It was killing the babies as a punishment because he hadn't done enough work. So that's what he says. Lama Rosa Lama Zeh. And Hashem says, I know what I'm doing. Koitzim him. Micha. Koitzim, they're terrible people. But if you want, you can go and save one. And he goes and saves one who is, of course, Micha. So hold on a minute. And of course, terrible results. Who made an ego, and of course, he made an Avodah Zarah, and advertised in the newspapers for priests, and Moshe Rabbeinu's grandsons became priests of Avodah Zarah. Fine. Okay. So here's the Shaila. The Shaila is, and you get this, is that clear? You get this with me? Okay. Just Gemara, Rashi. Why didn't Moshe? Why didn't Moshe get him? We know. I mean, I get this. I can get this, that Hashem doesn't have to tell me. So why was Moshe struggling with this? So I can't remember where I saw this. Somebody says, it's not that Moshe is struggling with this. Moshe is a Novi on an incredible level, and he knows that terrible things happen in our eyes, and children die, and there are terrorist attacks, and there's a Holocaust. He knows that stuff. What he's saying is, how do I sell it to Yidden? How do I sell it to Klal Yisrael? I get it, but how do I allow them to see it? Because it's easy to have a munah when you see Hashem and when you can see the happy ending coming. It's much harder if you're a Yid living in Mitzrayim and you died in Mitzrayim. It's only the third generation got out. What about the first generation and the second generation? That's the real challenge. The real challenge of a munah is when you don't see it. When you do see Hashem, it's easy. The message here is that even when it seems to be Elokim, it's really Hashem. And it might just be you're lucky enough to see that as well.